Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a period of history that, well, many understand as a tragic conflict. But our source today, historian Ilan Pappé, argues it was something far more deliberate.
Right. He frames it as a systematic act of ethnic cleansing, a really provocative claim.
Exactly. And we need to ask, how does he support that? You've brought us excerpts from his book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine.
Yeah, it's meticulously researched, drawing on archives, oral testimonies.
And it's crucial we state up front, Pappé's work is significant, definitely, but also highly debated. It really challenges established narratives.
Absolutely.
So our mission today, yours and mine, is to understand his central argument and the evidence he puts forward.
And what's fascinating right away is how Pad defines ethnic cleansing.
Right.
It's not just, a description of an event for him.
No,
it's a well-defined concept, in his view, a crime against humanity under international law. And he asserts the 1948 events squarely fit this definition. He gives very detailed accounts of planning, execution.
So this deep dive is really about unpacking how Pappé argues this happened.
Exactly, helping you grasp his argument and the sometimes quite surprising facts he brings to light.
Okay, let's start with that core concept then, ethnic cleansing. Pappé argues it's fundamentally an effort to make an ethnically mixed country, homogenous.
Right, by getting rid of a particular group.
Expelling them, turning them into refugees, demolishing their homes, erasing their presence.
Yeah, and he points out this often happens alongside intense nationalism, the making of new nation states.
It really does sound like a calculated process, not just sort of collateral damage of war.
And that leads to the question, why that specific term, ethnic cleansing? I mean, there are other terms, right, like catastrophe or Nakba, the Arabic word for disaster used for 1948.
Right, Nakba focuses more on the disaster itself, maybe.
That's Pappé's point. He says those terms can be more elusive about cause, about who or what is responsible. But ethnic cleansing, he argues, explicitly assigns responsibility.
It names an action and implies an actor.
Precisely. And he draws parallels, through history, biblical times, colonialism, and specifically mentions the former Yugoslavia, where the term really entered global awareness. Pappé asserts Israel's Plan Dalet fits both UN and scholarly definitions of this crime against humanity.
So, from his perspective, it's not just descriptive. It's a legal and moral accusation.
Definitely. A very heavy charge.
Now, one of Pappé's most, startling insights challenges a common narrative about motive. He argues the Zionist movement's core motivation wasn't just self-defense, but a pre-existing ambition for an exclusively Jewish state.
He claims Zionism secularized and nationalized Judaism. The goal, as he puts it, was reinventing biblical territory, Eretz Israel, as the cradle for this new nationalist movement.
Yeah, how do they view the people already living there?
Well, Pappé explains that many early Zionists saw Palestine as either, quote, empty or occupied by strangers, non-Jews, people who were seen almost as part of nature's hardship, something to be, quote, conquered and removed.
That paints a picture of, total transformation being the goal from early on.
And digging deeper, Pappé shows how this ambition became an ideology of transfer.
Transfer, meaning moving the Arab population out.
Exactly. He highlights some very direct statements from key figures. David Ben-Gurion, for instance. In June 1938, Ben-Gurion declared, "I am for compulsory transfer. I do not see anything immoral in it." Quite blunt.
Wow, and others.
Joseph Waits, who was central to Zionist land acquisition, wrote in his diary in 1940, "The Arabs will have to go." Pappé notes these views were often kept quiet, confided to close associates, put in diaries.
Waiting for the right moment.
Waiting for, as Pappé quotes, an opportune moment for making it happen, such as a war. And that moment, Pappé argues, arrived in 1948. The war provided the cover.
And Pappé details how this ambition wasn't just talk. It translated into concrete military preparations, even before 48.
Right. He talks about the Haganah, the main Jewish paramilitary force then.
Initially seen as a defense organization.
Yes, but Pappé argues it was profoundly influenced by a British officer, Orden Wingate. Wingate taught them what he called punitive missions in Palestinian rural areas. He encouraged them to learn offensive tactics by joining British forces.
So like learning by doing.
Pretty much. Pappé gives an example. June 1938, Jewish troops joined the British to occupy a Palestinian village just for a few hours, but it was a taste of offensive action.
So Pappé is implying this fundamentally shifted their thinking, their capability, away from just defense.
Precisely. He shows how the Haganah transformed into a force capable of offense. And the most systematic preparation Pappé describes is something called the village files.
Village files. What were those?
From the late 1930s right up to 1947, Zionist experts meticulously compiled these detailed registries for over 1,200 Palestinian villages. Everything imaginable.
Like what kind of detail?
Topographic location, access roads, water sources, income, social structure, religion, names of Mukhtar's village leaders, and crucially, an index of hostility.
Hostility based on what?
Based on participation in the 1936 Arab revolt against the British Mandate. They even included lists of wanted persons.
These files sound incredibly granular. Pappé mentions they even detailed individuals suspected of having killed Jews.
Yes, and he states that, quote, in 1948, these last bits of information fueled the worst atrocities in the villages, leading to mass executions and torture.
It's hard to fathom that level of pre-planning for an entire population. He suggests this detail was directly used in the violence, like a target list.
That's Pappé's strong contention, yes. Ezra Danon, head of the Haganah's Arab section, their intelligence unit watching Palestinians. Pappé says Danon later used these exact files to pick out men for on-the-spot executions after villages were occupied.
He gives specific examples.
He does. Al-Zanat, a village surveyed back in 1944 by Arabists, Jews disguised as Arabs. Pappé writes its inhabitants were, quote, destroyed, and all its inhabitants expelled without any provocation on their part whatsoever in 1948. Showing how intelligence gathering, in Pappé's view, led directly to premeditated actions.
Okay, let's turn to the UN's role. 1947, Resolution 181, the Partition Plan. Pappé argues this actually became a recipe for the tragedy.
Yeah, he calls it a hasty act by an inexperienced UN. He claims its members didn't really have experience solving conflicts like this or much knowledge of Palestine itself.
So it created problems rather than solving them.
That's his argument. And if you look at the details he highlights, the plan gave almost 56% of the land to the proposed Jewish state. But Jews, there would barely be a majority, about 499,000 Jews to 438,000 Palestinians.
In the Arab state.
Got 42% of the land, but would have 818,000 Palestinians and only 10,000 Jews. A huge imbalance. Pappé states very clearly. Resolution 181 included no mechanism to prevent the ethnic cleansing of Palestine.
So, in his view, the map itself created a demographic problem for the Zionist leadership, pushing them towards needing more land with fewer Arabs.
That's the implication. And Ben-Gurion, who Pappé describes as the founder of the State of Israel as first prime minister, he certainly didn't stick to the UN's proposed borders.
No, Pappé quotes him saying the borders will be determined by force and not by the partition resolution.
Right. This strategic thinking, Pappé says, happened in Ben-Gurion's inner circle, this group called the Consultancy. They met often in Tel Aviv, sometimes at a place called the Red House.
Which, Pappé adds, was ironically later demolished for a car park, erasing its own history.
Yeah, Pappé paints Ben-Gurion as very assertive here. Does he explain how Ben-Gurion pushed this strategy through the Consultancy?
He does. Pappé details this shift within the Consultancy, moving from just retaliation for Arab attacks towards explicit cleansing operations. That's a critical turning point he identifies.
Even though their intelligence suggested things were relatively calm in Palestinian rural areas.
Yes, and they knew the Arab military opposition was quite weak. Despite that, Pappé shows Ben-Gurion pushing constantly for a much more aggressive policy.
And this relentless drive, Pappé argues, led directly to the blueprint known as Plan Dalet.
Plan Dalet. So what did this mean for the Palestinians on the ground?
According to Pappé, it sealed their fate. Adopted March 10th, 1948. He describes it as calling for their systematic and total expulsion from their homeland.
Regardless of whether they resisted or not.
Yes. Regardless of collaboration or resistance, he calls it a blueprint, implying real intent and planning, not just reactive warfare.
How does he show it was systematic?
Pappé emphasizes it wasn't vague at all. He writes it was, quote, handed down to the brigade commanders not as vague guidelines, but as clear-cut operational orders for action. These orders, he says, included a whole repertoire of cleansing methods.
Like what?
Destroying villages by setting fire to them, by blowing them up, and by planting mines in the rubble. And, quote, expelling the population outside the borders of the state if there was resistance. It was comprehensive.
Pappé notes that initial attacks after the UN vote, late 47, were sporadic, but still caused about 75,000 people to flee.
Right, an initial exodus.
But after Plan Dalet was formally adopted in March 48, the scale just exploded.
Yeah.
He recounts how urban centers like Haifa were targeted first. That phase alone uprooted about 250,000 Palestinians.
Yeah, this wasn't just flight anymore, Pappé argues. It was mass expulsion.
And he details some, frankly, disturbing tactics used in these urban operations. Sheer brutality, psychological warfare.
Yeah, in Haifa, for example, Jewish forces higher up on Mount Carmel shelled the Arab neighborhoods down below. They used terrifying methods, rolling barrels full of explosives, huge steel balls down the steep streets into residential areas, pouring oil mixed with fuel down roads, then setting it alight and using mistarfim.
Those were the Jews disguised as Palestinians?
Yes. Pappé argues they weren't just for intelligence, but also to sow chaos and distrust within Palestinian areas. Who could you trust? Then there was the Cleansing the Levin operation by Or Hametz on Passover Eve, April 21st. Pappé cites orders. Kill any Arab you encounter, torch all inflammable objects.
And people trying to escape.
Crowds gathering at the port in Haifa were bombarded with mortars to drive them out and discourage any return. Pappé even mentions Golda Meir, a top Zionist leader then, visiting Haifa afterwards. She reportedly felt horror seeing the abandoned homes, food still on tables, kids' toys left behind. It reminded her, Pappé says, of the pogroms her own family fled in Russia.
He also provides specific examples of massacres to support his case. Deir Yassin, April 9th.
Right, carried out by the Irgun and Stern Gang, more extremist paramilitary groups. Pappé states over 200 Arabs killed, half of them women and children.
And Tentura, May 21st.
Pappé describes that as involving the systematic execution of able-bodied young men. Mass graves dug by tractors, supervised by Jewish soldiers. An eyewitness, Pappé quotes, saw between 85 and 110 men executed there.
So Pappé presents these not as isolated horrors, but as part of the broader pattern, reinforcing the argument.
Exactly. And he argues the horrors continued right through 1948, Saf in October. After the village fell, he states, 70 men were summarily shot, blindfolded.
Just shot.
That's what Pappé states, citing oral testimonies corroborated by other sources. He also reports 4 women and a girl were raped, and a pregnant woman bayoneted.
It's incredibly grim reading.
It is. And he details another incident, the alleged poisoning of Acre's water supply with typhoid during the siege in May 48. The Red Cross reported it at the time, Pappé notes, indicating suspicion fell on the Haganah.
And the purpose of all this, according to Pappé.
He states these were key tactics to accelerate the flight of the population. Not random violence, but instrumental to the expulsion.
So once the expulsions happened, the focus shifted to ensuring no return.
Yes. Pappé calls this Israel's deliberate anti-repatriation policy. Implemented systematically, he argues, both nationally inside Israel and diplomatically abroad.
How was it implemented nationally?
Primarily by systematically destroying the evicted villages, just leveling them and then transforming the sites into new Jewish settlements or planting forests over them, often presented as natural parks, physically erasing the past.
He mentions specific laws.
Yes, the law for absentee property from 1950. This declared all property left behind by Palestinian refugees as state land, owned by the Jewish nation, Pappé clarifies, and legally couldn't be sold or leased back to non-Jews.
And the Jewish National Fund, the JNF, was involved in this.
Centrally involved, according to Pappé. He notes that even today, the JNF website features parks built over village ruins, and descriptions might mention things like bustins, old fruit gardens, attributing them to nature's wonderful secrets, or even the JNF's own work.
So appropriating the landscape, renaming it, re-narrating it.
Exactly. It wasn't just physical erasure. Pappé calls it memoricide of the Nakba, killing the memory.
He gives examples of this, too.
He does. The village of Kafrain, he says, was wiped off the face of the earth, and then the land used for army target practice. Even places left standing, like Ein Had. It survived because some occupying soldiers thought it was picturesque, potential for an artist's colony.
Which it became.
Yes. And Pappé observes paintings from that time by artists like Marcel Junco, showing Arab figures literally fading into the background, depicting the erasure. And in Ein Had, the mosque was turned into a bar. Pappé points to these as acts of desecration, part of the memoricide.
So Pappé argues there was this deliberate campaign to erase not just the physical presence, but the very memory of Palestinian life.
That's his core argument about the aftermath. And for the Palestinians who managed to remain inside what became Israel.
What happened to them?
Pappé states they lived under harsh military rule for years, characterized by arbitrary arrests, forced labor in prison camps. He names Jalil, Atlit, Khalid, physical abuse, widespread looting of property.
He cites specific cases of abuse.
He mentions a particularly chilling one reported in an Israeli newspaper, Haaretz, in 2003. It detailed a 1949 case from the Negev desert. A 12-year-old Palestinian Bedouin girl was captured by soldiers, gang raped, and then murdered.
And the perpetrators?
Received minimal sentences, Pappé notes. He presents this as evidence of a pattern of systemic abuse and lack of accountability, even after the main 48 expulsions.
Which brings us, I suppose, to the historical denial that Pappé highlights throughout the book.
Yes, a profound denial. He argues the official Israeli narrative for decades spoke of a massive voluntary transfer.
The idea that Palestinians just left on their own or because Arab leaders told them to?
Right. That narrative held for a long time. But Pappé points out that Palestinian historians like Walid Khalidi in the 1970s started retrieving the truth, using memories, documents.
And then came Israeli new historians in the 80s and 90s.
Exactly. Using Israeli military archives, they did debunk the voluntary flight myth. They showed it wasn't voluntary. However, Pappé contends these historians often sidestepped the question of ethnic cleansing.
So even when the voluntary part was disproven, Pappé feels a crucial piece was still being avoided. What piece?
The piece Pappé argues was sidestepped is precisely the systematic, deliberate nature of the expulsions, the ethnic cleansing itself as a plan and policy.
Okay. And connecting this to the bigger picture, Pappé makes a provocative argument about the term Nakba itself. He says, while it's profoundly important for Palestinians, by leaving out the actor, it may in a sense have contributed to the continuing denial by the world of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine.
That's a challenging thought, that the term for the catastrophe might inadvertently obscure the cause.
That's his contention. He asserts that Israel's conditions for peace talks, its peace axioms, totally exclude discussing 1948 and the Palestinian right of return. They insist the conflict only really began in 1967 with the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza.
Erasing 1948 from the equation.
Exactly. And Pappé contends that unless Israel acknowledges the cardinal role it has played and accepts the consequences, all attempts to solve the Israel-Palestine conflict are bound to fail.
Why does he think there's such resistance to acknowledging 1948 and the return? He suggests it's deeply rooted in the fear of losing Israel's Jewish majority. This leads, in his view, to a fortress Israel mentality. He even compares it to the medieval crusaders or apartheid South Africa states that tried to maintain dominance against the surrounding reality, ultimately unsustainably.
Wow. Okay, so this deep dive into Ilan Pappé's The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, it certainly reveals a deeply challenging narrative. He presents this meticulously argued case for the systematic nature of the 1948 expulsions, and argues they have a profound, lasting impact on the present.
Absolutely. It's a powerful historical argument that continues to shape understanding and, well, intense debate.
And it really does raise an important question for you listening at home.
How do societies reconcile with these kinds of painful historical accounts, especially when they clash so fundamentally with official or more comfortable narratives?
Yeah. And what does it mean for the future, for peace, if, as Pappé asserts, these core historical events and justices remain unacknowledged?
It's definitely a provocative thought to end on. It invites you, the listener, to delve deeper into how history gets constructed, how it's remembered or forgotten.
And what the implications of that are for all of us right now.